Hey, thanks for joining. This is live with Miami's Community News, and thank you for joining us on Facebook and Instagram. My name is Michael Miller. Our guest today is my friend, Rabbi Harlig from the Chabad of Kendall and Pinecrest. Thank you for joining us and for being here. Today, we're going to talk, among other things, about Surfside and what's going on there physically and emotionally and spiritually. So you were there almost every day. Is that right?
Correct. Yes, I was there from literally the first morning. My phone rang at 5 a.m. telling me the building collapsed. The head of the chaplains program called and told us, got to get to the site. So I was literally pulled up there maybe 6 a.m.
So you're one of the chaplains of the Miami-Dade County Police Department. That's why they called you.
Correct. As a chaplain, they called us. Usually chaplains are there just for the police, to be there for them. If God forbid there's a police shooting, if there's a family member in the hospital, invocation, benediction. But this time they said, all hands on deck, because they knew a building collapsed. They didn't realize how bad the situation will be. So we all had to go there. And we played a role.
In my first 50 some odd years, I would not consider myself a religious person, more of a spiritual. But yet when I was in the presence of people that were in the clergy, it always gave me pause. Just slow it down. All right, let's focus in on what's happening right now. And so that's some of the comfort that you bring to the table when you show up at these sites. So what was it like for you when you showed up there and it's 6 or 7 in the morning and the building is gone?
Right. So it's interesting. The first thing I got to the corner, I said, I have a good friend that lives. Is that his building where he lives? Because I've been there once or twice and I knew it was the mid 80s. So the first thing is I called my friend. He says, you're the fifth person calling me. He happened to be in New York and he was like 3 buildings over. And then as I'm walking to the site and I go to the back to the building and I see the collapsed building, and at that point you don't know anyone in that building, you don't know what's going on, but you see family members there. And I remember seeing one father whose son should have been at home with him, but he wanted to stay in that building because his girlfriend was staying in that building, that she also shouldn't have been in that building. And he is telling me, my son shouldn't have even been here last night, because the only reason they stayed in that building is to go to a funeral for the next day. And he's like devastated and crying. And what do I say to him? So at that moment, what I did is I gave him a hug and I stood there with him. And then another family member is saying, my uncle just came here last night, 9:30 at night from New York. And he's went there, and his daughter-in-law and son-in-law is also from New York. They just want to stay there over the weekend, and they're in the building. And then you have cousins and family members coming close to the site, crying, we have family members in that building. Where are they? Now, remember, there was a group of people that lived in the other parts of the building that they survived because that part didn't collapse. But there was a lot of confusion. People didn't know where their relatives were. That was going on.
Again, I have attention deficit, so if you don't mind, we'll skip around.
Of course.
So when people a week and 2 later were talking about identifying the people that were there was this, don't talk about how they get identified. And even though we know at this point, it looks like everybody's been identified. What is it like for you to go there and when you look there and you realize the odds of them living are none, all right? And the odds of finding a body so they can be buried appropriately. What's that like? What do you go through, and how do you help the families deal with that?
Right. So that was one of the, main reasons why I was there so long, is because we realized that we need to be there for the families, and we need to also be there for the first responders to tell them that how they're supposed to work with the families and how they're supposed to work with the bodies. Now, in Jewish tradition, typically when someone passes away, the first thing the family wants to make sure is that they bury them right away, and there's prayers over the body. Now, the family members are obviously distraught. They're in panic. The first thing is they would love for the family members to survive. Obviously, that's the number one prayer. But as time went on, they realize that's not going to happen. More than likely, you need a miracle of miracles. So what we worked very closely, the chaplains, with the first responders, with the police, with the homicide, is to educate them and teach them the importance of when you retrieve a body from the pile, that you have to get every part of the body. And the family members knew that we were there, teaching and coaching them, and they were very receptive to it.
And that's very important. for the families and for the people that are doing it, because they want to do the things that are right.
Correct.
And so you have to instruct them and
Correct.
be there,
Yes.
sort of supervising, if you will,
Correct.
and reminding them just by your presence, that reminds them, hey, we need to look out for this and how we do that. So let's talk about the mental health crisis that comes out of there. I mean, thousands of people, literally thousands of people, were somehow connected to those, many thousands. What are folks going through now in their mourning processes? Is that different than a sudden death in a car accident or in a gradual illness? How do you deal with that?
So let me just add one other point to what we said before, and then I'll answer this question. A lot of time people were asking a lot about this. What are the steps that they were concerned about? And I must commend the Miami-Dade Fire and Police for being so open and so willing and so focused to helping the families. So besides when they brought out the bodies to give them the proper, making sure that every part of the body that they could retrieve, they retrieved, is they allowed us to come over once they ID'd the bodies and they ran the DNA on the site. They called us down and we did prayers over it, and then we helped the families get the bodies released from the ME's office. Those are things that was very, very important to the family members, knowing that it's being treated from all levels of government, and the police and fire and the chaplains are there teaching them to take care of their loved ones. Now, if you ask the emotional part of how things went, so the first period, obviously the first, I would say, till Sunday, the first 3 days, there was more like, why don't we bring them out alive? Why, let's get them out alive. They may be injured. But when Sunday, when the families were brought to the site, which was, the beginning, people thought it wasn't a good idea because you don't want to bring people to a site of where a family member may have been died.
Yep.
But it was a great concern. There was they were very tense. And then once they got to the site, I was there with the families. You could see they were screaming out the family members' names, hoping that maybe they could hear them, and crying. And as the hour went by, you could see they started praying and they started becoming a lot quiet. And when they left, a few things happened. Number one, they realized up to that point, they're thinking, what are the police and fire doing all day? Like, why are they bringing out my loved ones? Why did they only at that point, Sunday, maybe they brought out 10 bodies. I don't remember the number, but it wasn't a lot. And the second thing they realized was that the situation is very, very difficult. And they realized it's going to be hard to get them out alive.
So what's that like when you're standing there and there are dozens and dozens of people standing there just crying hysterically? What's that like for you to experience that and the empathy that you have? How do you cope with that?
One of the questions I had personally is I was trying to figure out, because I felt, in a certain sense, I felt, obviously very emotional about it. On the other hand, I felt very detached. And I was talking to someone, a top therapist, like after the week 3, I said, is everything okay with me? And he said, what you're going through is very typical of first responders, because when you come onto the scene, your focus is, what could I do at this moment? So you turn off your emotional side of you and you become very focused on what could I do? So when for example, when the family members came there, you don't allow yourself to get too emotional at that point, because then you can't do your job. So my point is scouting out the group and seeing, okay, who at this point would want to talk to the fire, the chief of fire, to give them guidance? Who at this moment would like to put on tefillin? Who at this moment needs to be left alone? So you become very, very focused. It was difficult for me to be actually in my office at Chabad and Friendship Circle, because I felt like I could be at Surfside and helping so much. Why am I in my office? I couldn't really focus at work. That I did see. I couldn't really focus much. I had to be there all the time. And when you were there, you were very single focused. Okay, what could I do now? Speak to the mayor, speak to the governor, speak to first responders, speak to the families, be at when there's notification. It's like you go. And they said, after you finish this period, it chips away at you without realizing. Only after you leave it, then you'll start kind of emotionally getting to you.
And that's a survival mechanism that the brain does to deal with that. Okay, so and we know for people that have been involved in trauma, and when you turn 50, most people have, all right, so that they survived emotionally. Let's say the surviving families, and now, all right, they realize, okay, they've been buried. All right, the place is gone. Maybe there's some personal effects they're going to be able to pick up. but at this point for yourself and other people, it's starting to like, now how do I feel about it? So could you share with how you're feeling today compared to a couple of weeks ago about
I'll
what
share
you've been
different
through?
feelings where it changed. So number one, a lot of families, I've been there by notification, and I've asked them, tell me, for the 2 weeks, did you believe they were going to come out alive? Like, we're 2 weeks into it. You saw the pile.
Yeah.
A lot of them told me they did believe it until they got the call from the homicide, and it was very interesting. It was a very mixed feelings, and I was on numerous notifications. They call the chaplain. I'm in the room when they tell them. They all said it's like a mixed feelings. That on one hand, they obviously devastated. The family member passed away. On the other hand, thank God I could now bury my loved one and be able to, start the second chapter. But a very sad point was, I remember it was like maybe 3 weeks into it. Most of the families already got the family members. It was maybe like 7 people left at number 90. And I've been to many of the I've been in many of the briefings where the room was like 300 people in the beginning. When I came there, when there was only when 90 were found already, it was down to 8 people. It was like 4 families sitting there. All of us felt very bad. It's like, you show up, I shouldn't use such an example, but you show up to the airport and everybody gets the luggage and you're like the only guy that still doesn't. Like, what happened? How come everybody got the luggage 1 a.m? I'm sitting in the room for these families. I'm saying, I feel so bad. The next time where you really felt bad and lonely is when, at the end, when they cleared out the site. And I came to the site, and the site is empty. Just a few people working the site. That's what it felt like, at the end of Shiva. It's like very lonely, like reality sets in. For the first 3 weeks, there was hundreds and thousands of first responders. Everyone's running around, people giving out food, family members there. Now it's quiet. That was also a very sad feeling when I stood there.
So, and we realized that's not the end. That's actually the beginning of
correct
this,
of
this
the next stage.
step.
Correct.
And
I've spoken, just to add, I've spoken to family members after Shiva. I've done Shiva. Shiva is the 7-day mourning period in Jewish tradition. They all said now is starting the hardest part. Because for a while there was hope. There was a while the media and there was thousands, everyone was there, and now everybody went on. So this starts a very sad part.
So I'm just trying to paint this picture. So you have a room filled with a lot of family members, and over every couple of days there'd be a little bit less because the family member had been found. And at some point there's only a few in the room. How lonely is that?
It's very sad.
It's like I try not even to imagine that, because emotionally it's very, very devastating. Just thinking what that family is going through, praying probably for a resolution.
Correct.
Right? Because intellectually they know. Right?
Correct.
Emotionally they don't know.
Emotionally they're not allowing themselves to.
Yes.
Right.
But that's a survival technique,
right.
That the brain has. All right. So here we are now. We watched the mayor and the spokespeople. They were very sensitive, all right, and acutely aware. We're going to keep looking, and we're going to keep searching, and we're going to do it till everyone is found.
And it's still going on right now as we speak. You know where the pile is? The pile right now, we call it the holy pile, was taken offsite. I went to visit it, and they have 2 piles. The pile that fell, and that's the pile they need to investigate. And then there's the pile that they intentionally knocked down. And they're still going through and bringing out things from the pile. And we're helping them identify what is a Torah, what is a religious, a spiritual thing.
And a lot of that was touched by human hands to remove that.
They all are.
It's just incredible that when you look at big buildings, you realize it's on the ground, and you see these first responders with the orange buckets and putting the stuff in there. Oh, my goodness. So more or less, how many first responders do you think were there and during that month?
They say each shift was 250, and they got all over Florida. It came from Indiana, Virginia, New Jersey. I would say definitely. I mean, I don't have the right number, but definitely over 1,000 were there. So
each of those people and their families are now experiencing this post-traumatic event, which is, okay, we did what we could do. This is what happened. It's just my job. It's just my job. I wanted to do it, all right, because I wanted to make a commitment. So now they're going back to what is the other stuff, but they're experiencing that flashback of being there for so long.
Correct.
And of the rain and the heat and the devastation that's there. So When you were watching the firemen and the and women and the people picking up stuff, what was that like for you as you saw these people painstakingly picking up the stuff and putting it into those buckets?
I was in awe of them because the first 8 days until they knocked the other building down, you could see their life was literally in danger because one wrong move of the pile, the building come down. And I said, I wish people could see, because we weren't really taking pictures, how hard they're working. Because in the news, you only hear they brought out 10 bodies, 11 bodies. People don't realize what they need to do, like you said, piece by piece, pick it up to look for family members, hoping they'll be alive and bring it back. And they're like 12-hour shifts, and you can see that, and they can only be 45 minutes to an hour on the pile. And they're laying down after they get off completely drenched, but so focused to get the work done. I had such respect, and that's what I said actually when I did the ceremony for them, is you guys are holy people. They, like you say, they say, well, I'm doing my job. And, I remember there was a professional sports team that came to show support. And I was thinking to myself, it's amazing that in life, we give more respect if someone could shoot a basket or hit a home run or a puck than these people that are out on the pile saving lives.
Yeah.
And it was really very inspiring to see it for me. Very.
And I know that in between this, you have all the legal stuff and the anger and all that will get sorted out. And maybe there'll be some new rules, new laws to that the government agencies will be a little bit more responsive. And maybe that'll come up in this session or the one after that. So we recognize that the government had an instant reaction to it when closed down a building, then a week later it was open. And then when we saw that there was a lot of rain and a roof collapsed, all right, it was like people had that connection. Oh, it must have been the whole thing. We have roofs collapse during the rainy season. It just happens. And I wonder how many of those folks that experience the Surfside when they had hurricane season, which is now, when that trauma gets brought back up again, they start reliving that. When we talk about Hurricane Andrew, I still get goosebumps, and it's 30 years. All right. The thought of just as a family member of one day they're there and a couple of minutes later, completely everything, 100%. All right. No, nothing. And sometimes we just want to hold on to that one thing. All right. Whether it's a shirt or a pair of shoes or a wallet. When a friend of ours died, I took his phone, and I have it in my drawer somewhere. I can still smell him. All right, the phone's been years. All right, and I got his glasses. I just have it there. It was just that connection that we wanted. So, what sort of thinking can you have for somebody that has no physical remembrance of a loved one? What is some of the things they can do to feel better about themselves?
Right. So two things. I don't know if people realize it's not just the 50 apartments that came down. The rest of the people lost everything too. Just imagine Michael, middle of the night, God forbid, there shouldn't be such a case, but they come to you and say, okay, Michael, Susan, you got to run out of your house. You run, you grab your phone and your charger, right? You run out and everything in your house is gone. Gone. Picture anything that you had, jewelry is gone. There's another 100 families that had experienced that no one's even talking about that trauma, which is very traumatic for them personally, that they lost. There's like 200 families lost everything in one moment, like you said. The point of for the families that lost loved ones, one of the things I shared when they came to the site, they brought them later on, a few weeks later, to the site to do a service, and they asked me, could I lead in service? And that was very intense for me, because imagine you standing with the families. It was at that point where they already switched from search and recovery to search and rescue to search and recovery. I'm standing with the families. They're in front of me, and the building and the pile is behind me. And now go talk to them. It's like a funeral for them. And I asked them all to please close your. That was actually hard for me to get through that talk. I said, please, everyone, close your eyes. And then I said, I want you to think about a happy moment that you had with your loved one in this building, or if they didn't, this wasn't their building, a happy moment, a positive moment. They all closed their eyes for a minute. Then I opened it up. Then they opened their eyes. And I said, listen, a house could be destroyed. A home can never be destroyed. And the life that they lived and what they did and what was important to them, that's something that'll always remain with you. You will never lose it. And the good deeds that you do and the relationships that you had, that's something that remains. And in Jewish tradition, we believe that the soul that you have, the godly soul that you have, that each person has, That is your real energy. And when you continue to do things that were important to them, like one of the big questions now, which I'm not going to get into that debate, it's not up to me. Should you have a memorial site? Should it not be a memorial site? How do you remember? That's obviously a personal thing for the families. But in Jewish tradition, you ask a good question. Hopefully you get something from the apartment. But if you can't get anything, how do you stay connected? Is what was important to that person, to your loved one that was lost, 122 they were alive, 124 they were in the rubble, more than likely not alive, to do the things that were important to them. Like for Michael Miller, it's talking and inspiring people out there, whatever the things that are important to you, to continue to do things and you remain connected to them. And that's the points that we emphasize to them.
So I remember with Hurricane Andrew, our house was pretty much blown away, and I went up with my wife to the second story. We had no roof or walls. And the first
Where were you living? In West Kendall?
In the crossings. And I said, I wonder where my first marathon medal is. We're crawling on the floor. I said, it doesn't matter because I got it in here. I said, but where's that ring I hadn't given my wife yet for the 10th anniversary? And so I was able to find it, which was a miracle among miracles, and gave that to her. No roof, all right? No roof, no walls, bedroom like that.
Wow.
And so that moment of both those things of saying it is inside and then finding that connection that was there. And I think that's important for all of us to be able to stay connected and to hug when we can. And Rabbi, we have 2 minutes left. I would, if you don't mind, I wish you Shabbat Shalom. And if you'd like to do a prayer today, that would be good. Would you like to do that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, when we get done, we're going to wrap it up. And Grant Miller's in the house right over here. All right, there we go. Rabbi, you're on.
Which camera?
Which camera, Grant?
Well, God, Grant.
What does Grant know over here?
Okay.
This one right here. All right.
Yes. So there's a prayer that we say each morning, and I think it's a prayer that really fits well for what we were just talking about. It's a morning prayer. The first thing we get up in the morning, we say, and I'll say it in Hebrew, then in English, Moda ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shechazarta bi nishmasi bechem l'rabba monasecha, which means we give thanks to God that he had faith in us and gave us back our soul. And we woke up in the morning. The story of Surfside reminds us you never take any night and any morning for granted. 122, everyone was laying peacefully in their bed. Most of the people, I'm sure, in that building. 124, they were in the rubble, unfortunately, and only one kid survived from that collapse. Every single morning we wake up, we have to be thankful. Thank God that we came back. Our soul is in our body and we have a new day. And the question really is, how are we going to make today's day the most meaningful and beautiful day? And you see, every family member, when I spoke to them, when we were having a conversation, they would ask, what would be the last thing our loved one would say if they knew that this night was the last night? And we all know it's not going to be make sure you buy another car. It'll always be for our loved ones and for ourselves is love and care and selfless acts of deeds, doing relationship with God, relationship with each other, and loving each other. So think about if our soul came back again today, thank God, which we're both sitting here today, how could we make today the most meaningful day that we know that when it's all said and done, this is the most important thing in our life, is our relationship with our families, our relationship with our community, and our relationship with God. And if you can make that day meaningful, then that day becomes the most beautiful day of your life. Have a great day.
Oh, my goodness. So sober moments for all of us. Again, I want to thank you for joining us. And our Facebook friends, feel free to comment, share it. And we're going to say have a great day and thanks for your time. And Instagram friends, thank you. And be sure to share that. Remember, Chabad of Kendall and Pinecrest, 87th Avenue, 112th Street, Rabbi Harlig. Thank you very much for your commitment to the community.
God bless you. Thank you so much.
All right, Mr. Miller, we are out of here.